Did you know, my beloved brothers, that at times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put you as a Muslim in a situation, a testing situation, simply to bring out from you this characteristic of iftiqar, bankruptcy to Him. Focus with me, and let's give 3 examples. Sometimes you will make a dua to Allah, Ya Rabbi, allow me to pass my exams. Ya Rabbi, give me a wife. Ya Rabbi, whatever it may be. And then subhanAllah, you spend months, years, and the dua is not being answered. And you say to yourself, why is my dua not being answered? Has Allah forsaken me? You don't know what's happening. You don't know what Allah has in store for you. What happens when you keep knocking at the door of Allah, and knocking, and knocking, and requesting? With time, your heart now, it softens up, and it melts, and it breaks at the doorstep of Allah. You now feel really in need of Him. Therefore, because of that characteristic which now exists in your heart, Allah gives you a reward which is greater than if you had been given the response of your dua there and then. Is this clear? Is this clear? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that if it was left to me and you, 50, 60, 70 years would pass from our lives and not once we would say, Ya Rabbi, I am weak. Therefore Allah puts you in a situation where it forces you to say, Ya Rabbi, I am weak. Therefore your place in Jannah is raised. If it wasn't for that difficulty, what happened? Your place in Jannah would have been kept. Ya Allah, how Allah works. And we accuse Allah of not listening to our dua, subhanAllah. Another one of these ways, where Allah Almighty puts you in a situation to bring out from you iftiqar, the topic of ours today, calamities, difficulties. I can guarantee, if I was to ask any of you, my beloved brothers, to come here and take this place, and to tell everybody about the time when you felt closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what will the majority say? When I got married? La wallahi, no. When I had my first kid? No. When I found a job, or when I graduated, or, wallahi, none of these would apply, rarely. The majority of us, including me, will say that the closest I have ever been to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is when I was in the most difficult and dire of situations. When I was bankrupt. When my mother passed away. When my child was born disabled. When I fell out with my spouse and we broke up. You experience difficulty. They say this was when I was closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because at that moment you noticed that every other rope had cut. And there's only one more rope now left for you. That's the rope of Allah. So you held on to it. You had no choice. And you called and you cried and you called and you cried. You became so close to Allah. And therefore when you look back at those difficult times, you say, wallahi, they were hard. But you know what? They were sweet. Wow, the level of iman that I had. This is why Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he says, listen to these words, ya ikhwan, wallahi, they are beautiful. Ya Allah, these words are so strong. Speaking about our meaning for today, and I have almost finished, bear with me. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah says, listen. إن الله عز وجل قد يبتلي عباده بالشدة قد يبتلي عباده بالشدائد فتتعلق القلوب به ويلجئهم إليه فيحصل لهم من الإيمان ما هو أعظم من زوال ما يكرهون من الشدة. Wallahi, these are beautiful. He says at times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests one of His slaves with great difficulties. Therefore Allah forces that person to look to Allah. Allah compels you now to look to Allah for help. And therefore the heart now becomes attached to its creator. And therefore the level of iman that you get because of this difficulty is greater for you and more beneficial than the remover of the calamity itself. You with me, my brothers and sisters? How much Allah Almighty loves this act of worship. I will close with one more, and subhanAllah, I had a lot to cover with you today, but time is pressing on us. And I promised some brothers we will be finishing by 9, so I will try to finish before then. A third situation where a person is put in by Allah Almighty, which forces you to express your weakness to Him. Sins. Allah Almighty at times opens up a door of sin for one of the most righteous of slaves. Why? Why, brothers? Who can give us an answer? Throw anything out. Why would Allah Almighty do that? Huh? Because Allah loves to forgive. طيب. But before forgiveness can take place, what does that slave have to express? Repentance, afwan, nadama, regret, a broken heart, bankruptcy, iftiqar to Allah. Allah wants to remind that righteous person, hey, you can sin, don't forget. He's, alhamdulillah, praying, fasting, giving lectures, listening to lectures, benefiting, organizing halaqat, improving her appearance, raising children, etc., etc. And then, subhanAllah, with time, hidden arrogance that begins to appear in the heart of this individual, which is so discreet that he denies it. I'm not arrogant, astaghfirullah. Arrogance is haram, but he is arrogant. And his parents can't even talk to him anymore now, because he's righteous. And his friends, they can't communicate with him anymore, because he feels he's a level above everybody else. Therefore, what does Allah Almighty do? Out of mercy, He opens up for him a door of sin, and he enters it. What does he do the moment he commits the sin? He lowers his head. Astaghfirullah. Wow, I forgot that I could sin. And then he begins to call upon Allah. And he begins now to bring iftiqar in his life that was missing all those years. He had a lot of acts of worship, mashallah. And they were increasing, these acts of worship. But what was missing? Dhul, humility, crying, weeping, feeling that I am nothing, it's all from you. Therefore Allah opens up a door for sin, and what? His heart breaks, and it takes him to Jannah. That is why some of the pious predecessors would say, a person may commit a sin, and that sin will take him to paradise. And a person may do a good deed, and that good deed will take him to the fire. Ya Allah, how does that work? Ibn al-Qayyim says, easy. You commit a good deed, and then you continue to remember that good deed when you're awake, when you're asleep, when you're standing, when you're sitting, when you're lying down. And you begin to feel impressed with yourself and content. Man, I'm going to enter Jannah from every one of its 8 gates. I wonder which one I'm going to go through. And subhanAllah, now it's like it's a given. Until this good deed ends up taking you to the fire. And a person may commit a sin, like we all do. But he remembers that sin in the morning and the evening. And he thinks, Ya Allah, has Allah forgiven me? He remembers it when he's standing, sitting and lying down. Has Allah forgiven me? And then that sin, thinking about it, pushes him to do more good deeds and more good deeds. Ya Rabbi, forgive me for that sin I committed. Until that sin ends up taking him to hell.
وتيقظت أيضا عيون نامت عيون الخالق